In the future then, once we are able to accomplish these goals, do you feel that it'll stagnate and that space settlements might not be able to actually be built or accomplished, or even if there is one, if it'll be abandoned?
Well, there's no question that, given some reasonable amount of technological development, that we can build space settlements. As just an existence proof, I don't think this thing along. If we continue to advance our technological capabilities for 1,000 years at something vaguely resembling the rates of the last 100, no problem. And we can probably do it quite a bit quicker. But I'm just going existence proof. So we can do this. My guess is that will be very much like towns in the West or villages, when people came out of Africa or wherever. Some settlements will thrive and other settlements won't for one reason or another. I think there'll be lots of settlements. For instance, I'm not talking about one. Typical design for a space settlement is in the order of a few thousand people. The biggest designs are in the order of a couple million people. So obviously, if you're going to have a solar system-wide civilization, you're probably going to have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and eventually millions of these settlements. But I think this is something that will happen because if you look at successful species, they are expansionistic and they want to grow. The species that are on the endangered species list are like, they live in one lake in Oregon. And if somebody comes along and paves over that lake, that's the end of that species. And we have laws to prevent that sort of thing. Those are good to have. But we as a species, not just as a species, but as life, we are one thin coating on one planet in a galaxy which has, I think it's 100 billion stars. I may have that number wrong, but it's some very large number of stars, most of which apparently have planets. Okay? And one of those planets has got a little thin film of life on the exterior. That's extremely vulnerable. Okay? And this is anthropomorphizing like crazy, but in a sense, I really believe it. Gaia, which is sort of a word that means life as a whole, thought of as a single organism, invented the dinosaurs. It evolved the dinosaurs, if you will. And then we had an asteroid hit, and there weren't any dinosaurs anymore. And Gaia sort of went, that didn't work. I need something spacefaring. What would that be? Let's try mammals, And here we are. And our function, every species in an ecosystem has a function. There's the top predators, there's the primary producers, and the canopy and all that sort of stuff. Our function is that we are the only species that can get life into space. The dolphins are probably as smart. They may be smarter than we are, but they don't have opposable thumbs and they can't build rocket ships. Okay? So I believe this is our job. This is what Gaia evolved us to do, because Gaia, like all living things, wants to survive, wants to grow, wants to reproduce, and we are the mechanism to do that for not just our species, but life itself, because we cannot go up there by ourselves without plants and animals and bacteria and fungi and all that sort of stuff and survive. We can't do it. It's impossible.
So why is it important that you think that we need to settle in free space and not the moon or Mars?
I think that there's a killer trade, and then there's secondary reasons. And the killer trade has to do with my definition of settlement. My definition of a settlement is you raise kids. Okay? If you don't raise kids, it's not a settlement. It might be a work camp. It might be a retirement home. It might be a vacation spot. It's not a settlement. There's a settlement when you raise kids. If you raise kids, and we're talking about the early generations, if you raise kids on the moon or Mars, you're going to either have a sixth or a third G. And you can say with certainty that those kids that grow up in that environment will not be very strong, and compared to kids growing up in 1G on Earth. And in particular, if you have a kid who is a great violinist, and they are raised on Mars, they will never play Carnegie Hall. They won't be able to stand up. And if you have a kid who's a great athlete, they will never be able to compete in the Olympics. And I don't know too many parents that would accept that. I certainly wouldn't. So it also may be that there's much more serious problems, okay? Very, very serious problems. We just don't know. But we know that this problem will occur. So that tells me that in the early days, I'm not talking about 500 generations later, but in the early days, that the first settlements have to provide 1G. And you can do that in free space by building a giant cylinder or torus or whatever, and you spin it. You have 250-meter radius, 2 RPMs, you get 1 G in the main. So all the issues that are involved in micro-G are just basically finessed under the assumption that pseudogravity is close enough to real gravity to work, which is probably a good assumption, but has never been tested because it's hard to test. So that's the killer trade. Then there's here's the easier. It's easier. And I put as evidence, and you want to do the easy things first, because this is extraordinarily difficult to do. Extraordinarily difficult to do, so don't make it harder. You make it as easy as possible. And as evidence, I submit to you space stations. We have had space stations, which are work camps in space, since the 70s, right? For 40 some odd years. We have never built a base on the Moon or Mars. And there is no possibility that we will anytime particularly soon. Maybe in the 2020s, maybe in the 2030s, we don't know. So that suggests that it's a lot easier to build something in Earth orbit than it is to get it on the Moon or Mars. And there's lots of other reasons you can say. It's logistically easier. It's closer. It's either communications are easier, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, with one enormous exception. Now, so it's easier, so you should do it first. The enormous exception is that for a work camp, for the International Space Station, you do not need a whole lot of radiation shielding. You go up there for 6 months, you come down, you'll be OK. You might get cancer a little sooner, but you're probably all right. For a settlement with infants and pregnant women, you need very good radiation protection. So you need a lot of matter. And on the Moon or Mars, that's easy to come by. There's lots and lots of matter. In low Earth orbit, not so much. There's a couple of atoms per square cubic centimeter. That's it. However, if you place your settlement co-orbiting with a near-Earth asteroid, which is significantly closer than Mars and energetically potentially closer than the Moon, then you can elegantly solve the materials problem. And there's even evidence, and it looks like NASA wants to, according to news reports, wants to do this with one asteroid. It's even possible to go out and bring asteroids into Earth orbit so that you can build your first settlements in some reasonably low Earth orbit from asteroidal materials brought in.
Well, is there anything else that you would like to share or add with us today?
Yeah, I would like to talk about the Space Settlement Design Contest. NASA Ames has been running for many, many years a student space settlement design contest. And it just completed its 20th contest. We expect to have a 21st, next March. The idea is if you're a 12th grade or below, you design a space settlement, or you elucidate some aspect of space settlement, or you write a short story about a space settlement, and you send it in. It needs to arrive at NASA Ames Research Center by March 15th. We will judge it. If you win something, your name goes up on the NASA website. Not your full name, because we can't put personal identifying information, but enough that you'll know who you were. Hopefully nobody else will. And we'll invite you to one of the big space conferences. And if you are a kid and you want to do this, just search in your favorite search engine for Space Settlement Contest. You will find it. And I encourage you to do it.
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.